On Monday of this week, a 16-year-old who was pregnant and desperate for an abortion was told by a court in Florida that she was too immature to get an abortion. But apparently they thought she was old enough to be forced to have a child against her will. Think about the violence of that, the cruelty, the lifelong repercussions. And then multiply that times millions and millions. This is the future that the Christian fascists who are riding high right now after overturning Roe v. Wade are fighting for and prepared to hammer into place for women all across this country and, yes, around the world. This fight over abortion concentrates whether women will be enslaved, treated as incubators, as less than fully human with all the cruelty that comes with that, or whether women will be emancipated. And this is only going to intensify because male supremacy, the oppression of women, is so central to this society that we live in and the system of capitalism, imperialism, because the patriarchal family remains the basic economic unit of society and social unit of society. This is something that is going to intensify even as it's been strained and stretched and women have broken out of their traditional roles in many ways. This is what's fueling the violent revengist male supremacist movement to rip away the right to abortion and to enslave women. And this is why the fight over abortion will be not only an ongoing fight, but a huge part of the fight shaping the future, whether we will get something terrible, a fascist nightmare future that Bob Avakian has warned of, or something truly emancipating, a real revolution. And the emancipation of humanity, which Bob Avakian has also analyzed, we are in a rare time that could be possible. And this fight for abortion rights and the unleashing of the fury of women against the all-around oppression of women needs to be a mighty force in this fight for something beautiful, for real revolution. And so with that in mind, we're going to bring you two segments that highlight dimensions of the ongoing fight around the right to abortion. We're going to go down to Houston and talk with somebody who was at the women's convention that was just held there last weekend. And then we'll go out to the Bay Area. We'll bring you clips from a press conference of an important lawsuit that's being filed against police abuse of protesters there who stood up with Rise Up for Abortion Rights. All right, so now I'm very pleased to invite to the RNL, the Revolution Nothing Less show, a member of the Revolution Club who is also a national organizer with Rise Up for Abortion Rights. Chantelle, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Sunsara.
Great. So listen, we wanted to have you on because this past weekend, the Women's March, the National Women's March, did a women's convention down in Houston and brought women together from across the country. Over 1,000, maybe 1,500 people came from all over the country for a major convention. They are following up on what they called a Summer of Rage, which we didn't actually see all that much rage from them in the streets after the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And a big focus on power to the polls, mobilizing people into the midterm elections as a major focus. And elsewhere on this program and in an ongoing way, we have done a very deep critique of why the elections are not going to be a solution to the crisis facing women, the loss of abortion rights, and to the larger crisis developing in this country. We need a real revolution and we need massive struggle against this rising fascism. So I want to acknowledge that off the bat. And yet, why we wanted to mainly talk with you is there was a tremendous amount revealed at this conference. People who are passionate, people who are agonizing, people who came from all over the country, and a lot of people who very much resonated with the message of Rise Up for Abortion Rights as well. So maybe you could start by telling us about this conference and some of who came out to it and the significance of that in your eyes.
Yeah, so this was the Women's Convention, and it was held on the 50th anniversary of the original Women's Convention, which was held in leading up to fighting for Roe v. Wade, or fighting to legalize abortion. So, and it was in the midst of a big feminist uprising, fighting for equality in all aspects. So this, it was really important that it was happening at this time, and that it was pulling women from all over the country. I think I talked to someone from almost every single state, and these women were participated in women's marches in the past. They were furious about the overturning of Roe, and they, wanted to learn how to organize and wanted to learn, what do we need to do to get this right back. So yeah, that's a little bit of who was there.
You were telling me earlier some of the stories of, especially these women who came from, as you said, surrounded by Trump country. Oftentimes, they're very neighbors surrounding them. A lot of them came out in ones or twos, but you actually, and many of them said to you that they felt very isolated and fearful where they're from. But when you saw them together like this, you get a sense there's a lot of people out there who are silent right now, who are not mobilized, but actually potentially could be if they understood the problem they're facing and had a different understanding of how to fight it. If you could give a further sense of who came to the booth, the Rise Up for Abortion Rights booth, what attracted them, and what they shared with you, what you learned about what drew them here.
Yeah, so hearing from these women from all over the country, the ones that came to the table, sometimes they'd never heard of Rise Up for Abortion Rights before, but they did see the green because in the opening presentation, they emphasized what it meant and just briefly and showed some pictures of even Rise Up for Abortion Rights and other people using the green bandana in the protest. So they made the connection. Oh, these are the green people, because no one else in that convention, was putting this green wave forward like we or at all, actually, just us. And they're like, oh, these are the people who are fighting for abortion rights. And there's women were telling stories about, there's small groups in the middle of Georgia or the middle of Florida or even like Illinois, Idaho, all over. But there's a woman who said she actually doesn't know anyone in her town. And one of these isolated people. And because in Missouri, on her street in her neighborhood, it's a lot of Trump flags, a lot of American flags, and they're the loudest at the school board meetings. They're the loudest everywhere, anti-maskers, all the whole nine yards. And so she said an act of protest that she, instead of having an American flag, she put up the rainbow flag for LGBTQ rights. And, she didn't march with Black Lives Matter, but she said she put the Black Lives Matter poster in her window just to show that there's someone there, and to, as an act of resistance. And for that, she would be harassed. She'd get hollered at. Her signs would get ripped up, taken down. She'd put them back up, like determined to have the statement. And even that they would call the police on her house for random reasons just to harass her and scare her and intimidate her. How many people in her town do feel the same way, but maybe aren't as brave, to put something up or, sitting at home and not knowing anyone or not knowing what to do. And how, we need to change that for all these people that are, sitting at home right now on the sidelines to be brave, to be courageous, but actually modeling that. So I thought that was pretty important.
The other thing that I thought was particularly interesting that you were sharing earlier was the most popular slogan and sign at the Rise Up for Abortion Rights booth, which was packed all weekend. It was just flocked with people. Maybe you could give a sense, share what the most popular was and why you think, what's the significance of that, what you draw from that.
Yeah, so we had forced motherhood as female enslavement. And people were really drawn to that. That was the most popular poster. And we'd ask why, and people would just, because it's true. And when you open it up and you talk about, what is this about, this attack on abortion? And it is to enslave, it's to control women's bodies, but not just their bodies, their futures, their destinies, their whole role in society being reduced to breeders. And, it was, I think, refreshing to people because it had, it's not normally about. And also it was able to open up things like that's the aim of this assault, is to do this to enslave women, not what people are so used to hearing, like at women's marches and other marches, they make it about bodily autonomy, that this is an attack on my personal freedom or liberty in some abstract way because it's just an attack on my body. And so then it also, what was helpful is that Rise Up for Abortion Rights actually had the commensurate, response to that, which is, we're not going to take that. We're going to rise up and we're going to call on everyone else who refuses to accept this reality of forced motherhood to get into the streets. And so they were excited to see people fighting for them and for like all women in this country, and to be a part of then being connected up with a movement that, you know, is talking about it. And, you know, so that I thought it was really important to be there, especially at the Women's March, you know, convention, to be there with that message, and for that message to actually be popular, well received, and you know, thanked even for being. So that was really awesome.
I think it's telling us a lot about what needs to be fought for and what can be called forward among a broad section of people in this country, and the urgency of that. So Chantelle, I want to thank you for taking first of all, for going down there and being part of the team that brought this message out, and for coming here on the show, the RNL show, and sharing with us.
Yeah, I appreciate being on here, and I was happy to go. It was really important and fun.
If you've been watching our show or reading our website, you're aware that there have been a series of very vicious, unprincipled attacks by so-called movement activists, as well as in the media, against Rise Up for Abortion Rights, against myself, against the RevComs, and against Bob Avakian. It's very important that Rise Up has stood up to these, that we have stood up to these, and that needs to continue. It gives people strength and it clarifies things, which we've been fighting to do on this show. It's also really worth noting that at this convention, in talking to Chantelle, we didn't include this in the interview, but in talking to her, she shared that most people there had no idea about these attacks, just like most people in society. We need to be oriented with this revolution and those involved in Rise Up for Abortion Rights out to this broad reservoir of people, the broad masses of people who don't know that there is a fight and how to wage this fight for the future that we need. So I wanted to just add that as a reflection off that interview. And next, we want to share with you some footage of a press conference from last week where the longtime civil rights lawyer, John Burris, took up and filed a lawsuit against the San Francisco police on behalf of two members of Rise Up for Abortion Rights and the RevComs, who staged a very bold and courageous protest at the NBA Finals just a few days before the overturning of Roe v. Wade. They'll tell you about that. In the course of this, they were viciously brutalized. One of them was strapped to a gurney and injected with sedatives against her will. And this is what the lawsuit is about. They will tell you about it. Here, I just want to note that this kind of repression, if it's not stood up to, will have a tremendously chilling effect. And it makes it all the more important, not just for this case, but for the atmosphere in society overall, that when people are attacked for rising up, that others come and defend them and stand up and have their backs, and make that a principle of our movements of opposition. As I said, John Burris is a longtime civil rights attorney. Among other important cases, he represented Rodney King in a lawsuit against the LAPD. He represented the family of Oscar Grant, who was murdered by BART police in Oakland, and a number of other cases. And we're going to start with him in this press conference footage.
First, I want to say thank you to Mr. Burris,
historic civil rights attorney, for meeting with us and taking our case. Throughout this process, he has been forceful and adamant that injecting protesters with a sedative, specifically me, was an outrageous violation.
I have filed a civil rights lawsuit, federal civil rights lawsuit, against the city and county of San Francisco. This lawsuit is really one to say you just can't inject someone with a sedative without having more facts for you to justify it. There was no safety issue as it relates to her or anyone else. She had not been threatening. She had not been verbally abusive. She was protesting about Roe versus Wade. The injection in someone's body without their permission is a seizure under the Fourth Amendment.
This has been a very heavy time that we've lived under, to see the Supreme Court of this country overrule 50 years of precedent, to say that women are no more than incubators, to enslave women, to say that basic control over women's bodies is not theirs. And so that's why the NBA Finals, myself and my fellow resistor here, we came to the Chase Center because we knew the eyes of the world were beyond this. That was only a few days before the Supreme Court overturned Roe. And I went down there full of fear, right? Because you know, there's going to be consequences, right? But I knew that if I don't do that, if I don't stand up, if I don't say, not today, not on my watch. The thought of a single teenager being forced against her will to give birth motivated us. We got down there, we unfurled our banner, and we were brutally dragged out. You'll see the bruises on Magda's skin. I saw Kareem hogtied. Their hands are strained behind their back, somebody's knee on their back, and I went into a panic about it. They were being treated like an animal, and then I was treated like an animal, like by myself. And then I was ejected from the Chase Center. And then began some of the worst 45 minutes of my life because I was worried for Kareem's life. I saw what was happening to them. I saw the racialized nature of what was going on here. I learned that they had been sedated, tied to a gurney, injected with a drug against their will, sedated like Elijah McClain, a 23-year-old black man who died in police custody after being sedated, like Kareem was being sedated. No one in police custody is disposable. Kareem is not disposable. Kareem is not disposable, and I am not disposable. Oh, yeah. And the millions of women and girls whose lives are impacted by the overturn of Roe v. Wade, they are also not disposable. I want to say again what Mr. Burr said, is that we were engaging in nonviolent civil disobedience, which I said to them over and over. And while I was on the ground, handcuffed in front of the emergency vehicle, one of the firefighters came with a needle towards me, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And I flinched and I said, no. What if I'm allergic? He injected a needle into my skin to sedate me. We're out here, and this case is to say that that is chilling. That is a chilling attack on civil rights. And I look back and I see the young people behind me, the high school students. What message are they trying to send if they're going to do this to people? And so this case, it's not just a civil case. It's a case to say that we will not accept this or tolerate this, and we're going to fight it.